It's like the Instagram fail where you try to like make the cake based on the beautiful unicorn cake you see, and then it's like nailed it, and it looks like it's melting off to the side. And, no one wants to make something that doesn't sort of become the shining image in your mind that you think you're making.
That's Maggie Smith talking about her national best-selling book, You Could Make This Place Beautiful. And her cake metaphor really gets at some of the anxieties a lot of authors might feel, but it also works as a description of the marriage she wrote about in that book. Things started off well with high hopes and visions of a shared future, but it turned into a real nailed-it scenario when she discovered her husband's affair. Maggie Smith joins us to get real about divorce, infidelity, family, patriarchy, raising kids, and more. I'm journalist Blair Hodges, and this is Relationscapes. We're mapping the stories and ideas that shape who we are and how we connect with each other. Maggie Smith, welcome to Relationscapes.
Thanks for having me.
I thought we'd start off by having you read one of the pieces in your book here called Some People Ask, because it's short, but it gives a nice overview of a lot of the things that you talk about in this memoir that's about divorce and family, and it's about your career, and it's about all kinds of things. But let's have you read that on page 10, Some People Ask.
Yeah, these were my attempt at, people won't ask me these questions if I just put the questions and answers in the book. And alas, that did not actually deter the questions. So this is one of them. Some people ask, so how would you describe your marriage? What happened? Every time someone asks me a question like this, every time someone asks about my marriage or about my divorce experience, I pause for a moment. Inside that imperceptible pause, I'm thinking about the cost of answering fully. I'm weighing it against the cost of silence. I could tell the story about the pine cone, the postcard, the notebook, the face attached, the name I Googled written in the handwriting I'd seen my name in, and the names of our children for years and years. I could tell them how much I've spent on lawyers, or how much I've spent on therapy, or how much I've spent on dental work from grinding my teeth in my sleep, and how many hours I sleep, which is not many, but at least if I'm only sleeping a few hours a night, then I'm only grinding my teeth a few hours a night. I could talk about how a lie is worse than whatever the lie is draped over to conceal. I could talk about what a complete mindfuck it is to lose the shelter of your marriage, but also how expansive the view is without that shelter, how big the sky is. Sometimes people just grow apart, I say. I smile, take a sip of water. Next question.
I love the Some People Ask sections because they're scattered throughout the book, and they get at questions that I think a lot of people run into. And I think this is why folks who have been through divorce can relate so much to the book, is these questions that are so familiar. What strikes me is all that thinking in the italic text that you read. That happens in a split second.
Yeah.
Like all of that calculus is so fast.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and it has to happen fast, right? Because when you're on the spot and someone, either whether you're on stage at an event or doing a podcast, or someone catches you at the farmer's market,
Yeah.
Like a neighbor, you have to do that like quick mental math. Like what do I really want to get myself into right now?
And there's something else behind the question of like what happened, which is like what really happened. Like people kind of want like, there's probably something that's not public, or they kind of want the tea. Like the question can be asked out of sincere regard for you, but there's also most of the time probably a little bit of that human impulse to just want to know the dirt.
I think that's true, but I also think particularly with divorce, the wanting to know, that kind of curiosity is a self-protective impulse. I think people don't even recognize that impulse when they are asking, but what they're really asking is, how does this not happen to me?
Ooh, yeah. That resonates.
Yeah.
My mind throughout the book kept going back to this pine cone. You mentioned the story about the pine cone, and basically this is kind of how you found out your husband was cheating on you. He had given your child this pine cone. And then later on, you discovered this is a pine cone that he picked up on a walk with a woman that he was seeing in another state. I could hardly wrap my head around him giving that to your child. Like, it's connected to this whole other thing he was doing.
Yeah, that was why I threw it away.
Yeah, that's right. The line that I kept thinking of, too, from this one is that sometimes people just grow apart. And now that the book's out, does that line still work? Do you find yourself still in conversations like this? Because people can know a lot more about the situations that you went through. So do you still find yourself just sometimes having to say, sometimes things just don't work out?
The deep irony of that is, I think when I wrote that section of the book, I thought that the truth was in all of that italicized internal monologue text.
Yeah.
And the sort of, not really lie, but like the like, let's just get this over with, quick, easy answer was sometimes people just grow apart. And the longer I've been sitting with this, the more I realize that's true. Everything in the paragraph is true too, but sometimes people just grow apart as sort of like toss off an answer as that is. It actually is not inaccurate. And it's not what happened, right? I mean, that happened also.
Right. And the thing is it could be, the growing apart could be incredibly painful, or the growing apart could be incremental over years and people just diverge in interests or kind of mature into different people. So yeah, I think the growth apart can be really painful. So it can be a true answer. And at the same time, what's behind that answer could be really different depending on who you're talking to.
Right. I mean, I meet people now, or I see, I just had friends who celebrated 20 years together and they're posting, photos of their younger selves and like swipe to see the current version or how it started, how it's going, that kind of meme. And it feels like a miracle to me now that there are so many people who grow together over 20, 40, 60 years instead of growing apart. I think it's like a beautiful miracle that some people managed to do that. I did not.
Right. And we see you grieve that. There are several times in the book where you talk about grieving the loss of that kind of connected relationship over years. You're like, at this point in your life, you can't ever have that. You can't have a relationship that you shared when you were in your 20s and are now, in your 40s. That person is connected to the person you were with, and it's not possible to recover it.
Yeah. I mean, just being able, I get a little envious of seeing pictures of people from their, like the 90s and they're still with that person. And I think I don't get to do that. Like, I don't get to carry forward that human being with another human being. I suppose if I met someone and got married this year and lived to be 97, I could still have a golden anniversary. If they also lived to be
Yeah. It's a lot of pieces.
I think it's unlikely that's going to happen. So that was actually a fair amount of the grieving process. Wasn't just my specific marriage. It was, and I think everybody gets this, it's all the sort of things in the future that you think are guaranteed you when you quote unquote settle down with someone. And then, all of those things kind of go up in smoke when it doesn't work out.
Did you wrestle a lot with feeling like those years were lost to you then? I mean, a lot happened. You had kids during those years. You grew professionally. You struck out on your own in sort of bold professional moves. You became a successful and very known writer. So I'm just wondering if there's a sense of lost years, because even some people that have a lot of things to look back on fondly still might feel like, dang it, I wish those years were spent differently. Like, do you live with a sense of regret about it?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I think at the beginning I did. Like, really? Now I'm in my 40s and I have to start over? Like, now? It would have been easier 10 years ago, for sure. It would have been easier 15 years ago, for sure. But when I look at my kids and, I mean, frankly, the life we've built here, it's sort of impossible to imagine it happening any other way, because to rewind the film far enough to get a different result, I would be erasing them from the story, and I can't.
See, this I wanted to ask you about this. How long, to preface this question, how long from beginning to end of writing the book? Do you remember about how long it was?
I wrote the book sort of some pieces of the book existed before. I knew I was writing a book. I pulled some poems in. I pulled some previous essays in. But I wrote the book for a year.
Okay. The reason I ask that is because we get to see you grow during that year. And this is one of the gasp out loud moments. And there are a few of them in the book where I literally was like, it usually involved something that your ex had done. But this one of the biggest for me was something that you said when people would ask you a question, wasn't it all worth it because you got the kids out of it? And earlier in the book, your internal voice says, actually, I might undo it all, even knowing that that would entail the kids.
Yeah.
But verbally, you also can't imagine life. So what you say to the person is, well, I can't imagine life without my kids. The thing you're not saying in italics is maybe, or maybe even probably. But we see you grow from that. Talk about that growth over the course of the book, because that was a huge admission to be like, you know what, maybe not. Maybe it wasn't worth all that pain.
Yeah. And not just for me, but for them. You know, like a lot of what I wish for them is a different kind of childhood and a different kind of family. And so I remember thinking about that, like, well, if I never had my children, I wouldn't miss them because I wouldn't have known them.
Right.
And they wouldn't miss me because they wouldn't have known me. And so really, it's not hurting anyone to say I would rewind the tape and completely do this all over again. And throughout the course of writing the book and living that year and sitting with everything and really thinking about it, I got to a place where I was like, no, actually, I'll take the heat. Like, I think it's worth taking the heat myself. I think they can take the heat enough so that we get to have each other. And in the end, that has to be worth it. But I did a lot of that in the book. I mean, a lot of that is my thinking at the beginning of the book is not my thinking at the end. And I think, that's a sort of accurate reflection of life, not necessarily a convenient narrative arc. Like, oh, on second thought, I changed my mind, reader, from what I told you 30 pages ago. But that's how we live. I don't know how we live without that.
Right. And it didn't feel like a setup. I felt like I was experiencing you process that in real time. And that when you wrote that original piece, you hadn't set out thinking like, how is this going to fit into my book overall? You were just writing the pieces as they came. And so we get to experience that growth with you. Here's the piece on second thought. It's really short. I'll just read it. It says, I've been thinking about what I said before, about wanting to undo it all. And the more that time passes, the less I feel that way. Rilke comes to me in these moments. This is a poet, whispering, no feeling is final. I don't just want to have kids, I want these kids, though damn it, I wish they had an easier path to travel. I wish we all had an easier path. Here's what I think about the most. In some parallel universe, I can save the children and jettison the marriage. This is magical thinking, as in some Greek myth we're yet to discover. A son and daughter spring from me, whole. No feeling is final. It strikes me that can turn in on itself when it comes to joy too, though, right? Like,
sure.
That quote, usually we think about like if you're depressed or something, no feeling's final. But there's also a sense in which like the best joys can be fleeting.
That is the last part of a quote I actually have. I'm looking at it right now on a sticky note on my office window, and it's been living there for so many years, which tells you I don't wash my windows.
Who does? It's
let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. Mm-hmm. No feeling is final. So yes, the beauty, I feel like so much of life is toggling between beauty and terror, sometimes in the same like 3-minute stretch.
Yeah. And it's great to see like your relationship with your kids throughout the book. There's a beautiful piece about Violet, your daughter, and mixtapes. Like you guys really have bonded over music.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the coolest things is as they get older, I feel like I set a music syllabus pretty early with my kids. We had a no kids music rule in our house, like no kids bop, no music for children. We just tried to choose like clean-ish music that week so that we could enjoy it. And one of the coolest things is seeing what from sort of my music syllabus they are carrying forward and what they like, of like, early to mid 90s indie rock. And then what they strike out and find on their own. And that's pretty much a metaphor for, I think, living with children.
Yeah, that's exactly why I brought it up. And then also the reciprocal love, the love that your children showed for you. So there's a piece called Hidden Valentines where your son Rhett had gone out of town. I think he went to his dad's, I think, and then he left
I have one right here.
Oh, my gosh. Yes.
It says, "You are nice and you make me laugh."
Yeah, and he put these all around for you.
Yeah.
It's so sweet. Like in other words, I see romance happening in the book, even when your partner was gone, after the divorce. There's a certain kind of romance.
You know what? It's funny. It's sort of like it's the end of a love story, but not the end of all the love stories.
Yeah.
And I really think so much of this book, it's a love letter to writers and writing, but it's also a love letter to parents and kids, and a love letter to my kids in particular. Like that's the real love story is a self-love story and kind of finding yourself in the mess, but it's also like, but we have each other.
That's Maggie Smith, and we're talking about her memoir, You Could Make This Place Beautiful. Her writings appeared in the New York Times, the New Yorker, the Nation, the Paris Review, and the Best American Poetry. She's a best-selling, award-winning author of the book Good Bones and Keep Moving. Those books are also available. So, Maggie, you write a lot in this book about a common problem in marriage, and this podcast has other episodes that'll touch more on this, but I really liked how you explored, and that's how professional success and a division of labor in marriage can make a big impact. So you wrote a poem that went really viral, and this was a landmark moment in your journey toward divorce because your partner had started out as a writer as well, and then had diverged from that path, became a lawyer, and it seemed like because you persisted with writing, that your partner couldn't fully embrace your professional success. He'd even downplay and sometimes even ridicule your career as maybe like a hobby or a little indulgence. And he also wanted you to really step into this sort of traditional mother role, despite the fact that you're both sort of progressive-minded folks. There was one time when he called you on a work trip to come home because your son had a fever. And that, again, was another one of these like gasp out loud moments.
I think this happens in all kinds of families, whether or not one of the partners is an artist or a writer or not. I mean, it doesn't necessarily keep itself to families where one person has a more traditional job and one person has a creative job. Frankly, it doesn't only happen in families where, in cishet marriages, where the man out-earns the woman. Mm-hmm. I know women who earn more than their husbands who are still packing every lunch and doing every pediatrician appointment and having a hard time getting away for professional obligations. I know lots of women who, when they go to conferences, someone comes up to them and says, "Oh, who's got the kids?" And I know next to no men. Yeah, exactly. And I don't think that men get that kind of, "Oh, who's got the kids?" Mm-hmm. Because everyone assumes your partner has the kids. Yeah. So it's a real issue, and it's not a poetry versus law issue. No, it's not a sort of creative versus traditional issue. I don't even think it's about earning, although I do think it can make the power dynamic more pronounced when one person significantly out-earns the other. And
it's in the data.
Yeah, it's in the data. And I think there is a sense of maybe feeling somewhat exempt from some of the domestic responsibilities if you're the person who's paying most of the bills and via your income. And so that just sets up couples, I think, for a lot of resentment, frankly. And I don't think there's anything that kills a relationship faster than resentment, feeling like you can't be your full self.
I think that's right. And we see you kind of, I mean, you talk a lot about it in the book, but you also pull back somewhat because you mentioned at one point there's this spreadsheet of the cognitive labor that you're doing in the relationship, the day-to-day schedule keeping. And one example that comes to mind for me is like a dad feels like he really succeeded because he showed up to Junior's ball game. And it's like, but he didn't take him to practices. He didn't sign Junior up for the ball. He's not washing Junior's uniform. He's not, bringing treats, blah, blah, blah. But he feels like a really involved dad because he shows up for the game. You talk about this spreadsheet of labor, and then you say, I thought about including it here, but I'm not going to. So you didn't include the actual spreadsheet, but really, it's like peppered throughout the book, right? Like the spreadsheet's pretty much in the book.
Yeah, it's pretty much in the book. I mean, and I think anyone reading this knows what's on the spreadsheet. Like we all know, or maybe if you don't know what's on your spreadsheet, take some time and write it down.
Yeah.
Because if you, sometimes I'll get done with a day and I'll think, I feel like I didn't accomplish much today, meaning like I only wrote 500 words or something. Yeah. And then if I actually think about what I accomplished, I've done 3 loads of laundry. I took the dog to the vet. I signed up someone for a camp or soccer. I emailed a teacher about a project that my child had a question on. I looked at something. I mean, I planned a vacation. I did this. And it's so much of that domestic stuff that doesn't count as quote unquote work,
Yeah.
that takes up so much time and doesn't really feel like accomplishment or
No.
achievement.
And it's not paid.
And it's not performative. It's invisible labor.
That's right.
And that's the one thing I realized about my invisible labor is that when I was gone to teach or give a reading or visit a university, the invisible labor that your partner does becomes very, very visible to you when they are not there, and you realize that the dishes don't do themselves and the laundry doesn't just arrive folded in the dresser drawer, and the play dates don't get scheduled without this human being. And so, yeah.
It also reminded me of the Google Maps essay where you wrote this beautiful essay about sort of tracing your divorce through Google Maps, because you can go back and see pictures of the house, and you sent it to your partner after the divorce to kind of just, hey, take a look at this. I'm going to be publishing this. It involves you. So I thought, you should probably take a look before it goes out. And he sent you notes back. And one of them was like, oh, see the recycle bin? I took that out. Like,
it was illuminating. The edits were all of my crying was deleted.
Oh, yeah.
Anytime I mentioned crying was deleted. And then there were
that's too on the nose, Maggie. Like, isn't it? Isn't that like too on the nose?
I don't know. I mean, that's why I said it was really psychologically revealing, like wanting credit for household chores and wanting to not acknowledge the pain that you've caused another person. I found that really interesting. And I published that piece in the Times, and I didn't think I was going to write a memoir, so I thought that was it. But when I went to write the memoir, I thought, I don't know how to tell the story without offering these edits as a kind of shorthand. I mean, I'm not going to offer the annotated version in this document, but it said so much in so little space. Like a glance. You know how you can just tell, like if you know someone really well, you look at them across the room at a party and their expression tells you like it's time to go, or like get a load of this. That's kind of how I received those edits. It was a lot of data in a very small space.
And I imagine there were probably maybe some legal considerations or some interpersonal considerations about sending it to him first. As you're writing that piece and then the book more in depth, did you worry at all about his reputation? I mean, maybe the lesson here is don't ever marry an author, but he at the time he was one. So like,
it's tricky. I mean, I think, we have responsibility to other people when we write about them. And so I was really careful. And frankly, I mean, people who know me, very considerate. Like people who know more about the situation are like, oh yeah, you were really considerate. And I was, and not just because of the legal considerations. I mean, that's always something, but also because I didn't write this book to hurt other people. I certainly didn't write this book to expose other people. And so I think, for people who might be thinking about writing about their lives, whether in a memoir or an essay or something, if they think they're going to share it with other people, the piece of advice I have is always think about your motivations. And if your motivation is anger or revenge, or they thought they could do this, well, now I'll show them that, then you put your pen down or pick your pen up, but that's for your journal or something that you can share with a therapist or a friend. That's like happy hour venting. If your desire is to know yourself better because you're curious about a situation, because you think that unpacking this might be useful for you or for someone else, I think those are sort of safer, healthier motivations for writing about your life. And will probably, if you keep true to those motivations, will keep you out of the weeds.
Oh, yeah. I want to go back to motivations in a second, too, but also wanted to point out, you don't name him.
No.
You call him redacted sometimes even, but this is the age of Google, though. So like,
yeah, if people want to do the legwork, I mean, anybody can find anything. Like, people can. If we can
is
find
it weird
out,
too that people do? Like I did. I Googled
it. I mean, it's a little strange, but also I think it's a human impulse. Have I read stories where someone was unnamed and have I tried to figure out who they are? Of course. I mean, we've all done that. I don't think there's any shame in it. I just, we live in an age where you can, if you can find Trump's taxes, you can find You can find anything.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Well, I also wanted to point out, too, here's a piece called An Offering, where you say, I feel like I need to reiterate something. This isn't the story of a good wife and a bad husband. Was I easy to live with? Probably not. I craved time to myself. I thought I knew best what the children needed. I was stubborn. I dislike confrontation, so I can be avoidant or passive aggressive. So, and we see this throughout the book, too, that you're not, it really isn't a book of...
No. And I think Gina Frangello, who's a terrific writer, said something really smart about memoir, which is that there are two essential ingredients. One is self-assessment, and the other is societal interrogation. Mm-hmm. And I think this book has both, which I'm grateful for because I didn't know the two ingredients from Gina until after I was done reading it and had already turned it in. But I think if that goes back to motivations. If you are writing a book in which you are going to be the hero of your story, no. Like that's the wrong wrong motivation. Yeah. I knew I didn't want to, not only did I not want to write that book, I don't want to read that book. I don't want to read that book. That's too easy.
That's right. And with motivations, it's really wonderful to see you wrestling with motivations throughout the book. This book's very meta. You talk about the creation of the book throughout the book. And so what we learned, too, is that you didn't have one single pure motive. There were times when you talk about being led by curiosity, and writing was an exercise in trying to figure out what you thought about something. When you're trying to make sense of everything. Another reason would be why you would publish it is so that you could share pain and share discovery with other people. And this is where memoir becomes a sort of curation. And like why we read memoirs, because we get to try on other people's lives, or why we ask someone what really happened. That question is like, I want to see how this fits on me. And so there's one particular lesson I think that you're trying to draw out. And this comes out in this piece that I just read from called An Offering. And you're quoting from a Buddhist teacher about how, and by the way, this is the Amazon highlighted quote. Like if you go to your Amazon page, this is like the top highlighted part of your book, where you talk about, here it is. It says, "Thank you for the pain you caused me, because that pain woke me up. It hurt enough to make me change. Wish for more pain," a friend's therapist once told her, "because that's how you'll change." That really resonated with people, that pain teaches us, that there's a utility to pain. But you're also, it didn't seem to me that there can be an underside to that of celebrating pain or of having a sort of like privileged pain when other people have like worse pains. So it could be easier for me to talk about pain when, pain could be worse. So I just wanted to explore that with you for a minute about the limits of the idea that pain can teach us. Because I agree that it can, but there's limits to that.
Yeah, of course. I would like to learn lessons any other way, frankly. Yeah. I don't really want pain to be my teacher. Yeah. But I think the bottom line is we don't get to choose our teachers. And so I've learned a lot in my life through joy. I've learned a lot in my life through, frankly, confusion and not knowing things and having to figure it out for myself. But in the case of the end of my marriage, experiencing that pain and grief and loss taught me a lot about myself. I don't know if I would have learned those lessons another way. That doesn't mean the scales are balanced. I'm not at all saying, well, the lessons I learned about myself through my divorce really made all of this suffering for myself and my family worthwhile because they got me this lesson. No, I would always choose not to have the pain any day of the week. I would rather know less about myself and feel better, frankly. But with, absent that choice, which I did not have, I'm glad to have at least made some progress with myself and my life via this unpleasant experience, And I do think that's part of why we go to memoir. It's also to feel seen and feel understood. When we share our pain with someone else, whether it's a big pain or a small pain, I think we're telling other people, like, this happened to me. Maybe something similar happened to you. You pick up the book, you read it, and maybe you've been through a very similar experience and it makes you feel less alone. Maybe you've been through a completely different experience that rocked your world in a similar way.
Mm-hmm.
And you see how someone else kind of got to the quote unquote other side of it. And it makes you feel, it gives you a sense of kind of solidarity and like, oh, yes, this is the human experience. I mean, that's what I'm hoping for in sharing it.
My partner joked with me when I started this podcast of like, oh, you're going to include memoir? Because in the past, I've just done academic stuff, sociology and psychology and religious studies and all these things. And I actually kind of was a little snooty about memoir, dismissive of it, skeptical of it. And I decided to lean into it for this. And two things happen when I'm reading a memoir, the two things that I love the most. First, when an author says something that I already knew in a way I never would have been able to articulate or didn't even sort of realize I knew.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is when they tell me something I'd never considered before, but suddenly snaps into place in the most clear of ways, these revelations that happen when I'm reading.
Yeah, that happens to me too. I mean, that's why I think it's a genre I turn to a lot. And frankly, I get that from poetry also. So I think that's probably why I read primarily nonfiction and poetry, because those are places I go to be changed. Like I can't pick up a book of poems or a memoir and not be a slightly rearranged, slightly different person when I close the book. Like I don't think that we exit good books the same person that we enter them as, and that is a gift.
And we carry pieces of it with us too. Like we're changed. I should point out, as we're talking about pain and all the suffering that you write about and the grief and there's anger, there's frustration, there's some joy, there's some love, but you also, you say you're a lot funnier than your book is. There's a footnote that's so funny. It's like, I wanted like 20% more wit and 20% less pain, but this is what we got.
Yeah, it actually, I think my gallows humor comes out in this book because I feel like I meet people all the time and they're like, oh, you're a lot funnier than you're writing. And it's like, yeah, well, that's probably true of a lot of people unless you're maybe David Sedaris. I mean, I'm not a humorist.
Yeah.
So I tend to write through things that I'm puzzling over or grappling with. And that's not necessarily a space where I feel free to be funny. But in every other aspect of my life, it's part of my life.
Yeah. It made me think about the function of humor too, because sometimes humor can be an escape hatch out of difficult emotions. And it felt like you resisted that. So, you could have, you're a funny person and I'm sure you could have had lots of quips and witty things. But it seems like you resisted them because you're like, no, I need to stay in this moment and I'm not going to take the escape hatch.
Yeah. I mean, it's just not that kind of book. Like, I think I could have maybe written a funny book or maybe not that year. I was not in a place to have written a funny book. Maybe I could write the funny book now. But it's something even and I write about this, it's something even my therapist notices that whenever I'm telling a particularly painful story or talking about something really painful, I laugh. Like, it's so bad, I have to laugh. Like, can you believe that happened? And it is, that's that sort of emotional escape hatch where you can't sort of just let yourself look it straight in the eye and go there.
Yeah.
And it was important for me to do that.
Well, I'm looking forward to the sequel to this book. You could make this place hilarious.
No, I know. I wrote a book called Keep Moving. And then after that, I thought maybe the next book is just like, sit down.
Yeah, sit down.
Rest up.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. That's Maggie Smith. We're talking about the book You Could Make This Place Beautiful. And she's an incredible author. And has, as she mentioned, also wrote a book called Keep Moving, which is, it's a lot more like keep moving. It's got your happy aphorisms and sort of like, more motivational stuff. I think pairing these books is a really good idea. I wanted to talk briefly about being haunted. You kept the house that you lived with your family and your partner there. You wanted to keep the house so badly, but it means that you live in a haunted house of sorts, in a haunted city. You drive places and see where you went out to eat, or you see where this thing happened or that thing happened. And then in your house, all of the things that happen there. And you mention how, you don't put it in this way, but this is what came to mind, that divorce is kind of marriage by another means, especially if you have kids. And what I mean is that the relationship has to continue logistically, also in your memory. So divorce is kind of a hard kind of marriage by other means, and this hauntedness you talk about throughout the book.
Yeah, I still live basically in my hometown. So it's always been that way. Like I see people from different stages of my life all the time. I see places that meant things to me all the time. I live in the house that I lived in when I was married. My kids are still here. That was never going to change. It's one of
Mm-hmm.
the commitments that I've made is keeping my kids' life as untouched by all of this as humanly possible, which is laughable because, of course, it's not untouched at all. I mean, it's sort of,
Yeah.
napalmed everything, but the house is still here and we're still here and our neighbors are still the same and they're still in their schools and they still see the same people all the time and we still walk to the farmer's market and it's just important to me to sort of provide as much stability as possible for them. Now, what that means for me is not being able to get that quote unquote fresh start that so many people want. I think after a relationship ends where you just sort of want to, leave that part of your life behind and move on to something else.
Mm-hmm.
When you've lived in the same place for 40 years, you don't get to do that. And so it's, you're kind of taking one for the team.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
that's what being a parent is. It's taking one
Yeah.
for the team over and over and over. And to be honest, on one hand, it's difficult because there are a lot of memories. On the other hand, I don't think I would have thrived through this really challenging time without my community.
Yeah.
I don't think that would have been possible if we'd been living someplace else and
Yeah.
not getting to
Your
have
first lonely Christmas when like neighbors were like coming by and like dropping stuff off on Christmas morning
It's
to you when you were alone, your kids were away.
ridiculous how kind people are to me. People look out for me so much. My family is here. We have Sunday dinners every week. Like
Yeah.
I really feel, people have asked, like, is it weird publishing a memoir or having so many people know about your life and then you're sort of just like walking the streets, knowing that people are looking at you, maybe knowing
Yeah.
more about you than you know about them? It doesn't actually feel that strange. I feel very held here.
Oh.
I feel really supported here.
Yeah, you could make this place beautiful. This place means so many things, but I feel like in the book, it also means the literal place, that house, which it's so kick-ass that you bought it, that like it's yours. Like it felt really empowering that you were able to do that, reclaim it, claim it as yours.
Yeah, it was the most terrifying part of the divorce, other than sort of being on my own, was where are we going to go? And so being able to stay in this house, and that was thanks to Keep Moving the book, being able to stay in this house and be able to provide that for my kids was something I didn't think I was going to be able to do as a poet. And
Yeah,
it
right.
has been really empowering. So it's a good way to think of it as it's sort of a double-edged sword. Yes, on one hand, it's a haunted house. And yes, my ex-husband's handwriting is in some of the cookbooks. But on the other hand, like, we're here and we're still standing.
Mm. Oh, I love that. Do you have any favorite criticisms of the book, that like something where you're like, oh, that's really interesting? Or do you just kind of try to ignore any of that kind of stuff?
I mean, I don't know that anyone can really, I don't think that people really ignore it. I think if someone says, 50 people say something really nice about your book and one person says something mean, that mean thing will live rent free in your head forever. I think that's just what it is to be human. I try not to tune in too much or frankly put too much stock into either criticism or praise, because both can be dangerous. Too much praise can make you kind of complacent and not make you challenge yourself to do better, and sort of, you're competing against yourself when you're a writer more than you're competing against other people.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think, most of the criticisms of the book I anticipated. I anticipated people would say, why are you airing your dirty laundry? Which is why that's a question I posed to myself in the book. I anticipated that people would say, oh my gosh, aren't you worried about your kids reading this someday? I anticipated some people not liking the meta aspect of the book or the direct address to the reader. And I made those decisions anyway because it's my book. So you can, those people can do things their way if they want to.
Well, and I imagine when people meet with you who have read the book, most of the time, if you're going to a reading or something, people enjoy the book. And so you get to see a lot of different positive reactions. And there's so much in the book that a lot of different things could resonate with a lot of different people. There were so many pages I marked, like, I want to ask her about this. I want to ask her about this. Time's limited, so there was way more than I could possibly cover. But I saw on Instagram, you're celebrating the year anniversary of this book coming out. It's heading into paperback now. And you said this book has sparked meaningful, life-changing conversations. So maybe before we go, talk about the afterlife of the book as it continues on in your conversations. Maybe an example of some of those meaningful, life-changing discussions you've been able to have because of the book.
Yeah, I mean, book tour is always an opportunity to do that because I get to go to different cities and sit down with different writers and hear their questions and kind of have a conversation about, big life stuff with them, because we end up talking about not just divorce, but all kinds of things,
Mm-hmm.
We end up talking about patriarchy. We end up talking about parenting. We end up talking about memory and hometowns and family and secrets and silence and all kinds of things. And depending on who I'm talking to, that conversation takes a different shape and different texture and different color. And so every single event, if someone wanted to follow me like the Grateful Dead on book tour and come to all of my events for the paperback, they would be witnessing, 5 or 6 different conversations because they're so personal.
Yeah.
But really, some of the most meaningful moments I get to have around this book are talking to readers. It's sitting at the signing table and having people come up and hand me a card or hand me a crystal or, hand warmers they knitted me or, just a little something, or just to say, I gave this to my mom, or my best friend really needed this, or I wish I had had this when I was going through my divorce 20 years ago. I think something that happens with memoirs, when you share a lot of yourself, it kind of inspires or encourages other people to share a little bit about their stories with you too. And that's been a real, sort of beautiful point of connection with readers.
Well, I really hope people who haven't had a chance to check out this book, check it out. It's called You Could Make This Place Beautiful. There's so much we didn't mention, like the fact that your husband wound up with Pinecone. I don't know if he's still with Pinecone or not, but that at least happened. He moved out of state, which was just earth-shattering for you, and how that disconnected him from the kids. So there's a ton of stuff that we didn't cover. But I thought we would close with having you read a piece on page 302. We started off with a Some People Will Ask, and I thought it would be good to cap it off with a Some People Will Ask.
Okay, 302. Some people will ask, you say you want to forgive, have you? Someone will ask that, I'm sure, because I ask myself all the time, how do I answer? I could say it's difficult to forgive someone who hasn't expressed remorse. I could counter with questions. Why do I need to forgive someone who doesn't seem to be sorry? What if forgiveness doesn't need to be the goal? The goal is the wish, peace. Can there be peace without forgiveness? How do you heal when there is an open wound that is being kept open, a scab always being picked until it bleeds again? I could say, this is my task, seeking peace, knowing the wound may never fully close. Forgiveness is complicated. To be at peace, I think what I need is acceptance. I accept it.
That's Maggie Smith, reading from the book You Could Make This Place Beautiful. There's always a segment at the end of these episodes called Regrets, Challenges, and Surprises. It's where I ask people anything they would change about the book now that it's out, what the hardest part about writing it was, or what the most surprising thing was. And you've touched on some of this throughout, but before we go, maybe if you have anything to say about Regrets, Challenges, and Surprises, we'll close there.
I don't think I have any regrets about the way I wrote the book. Surprises. Honestly, I think the reception has been surprising. I did not expect
A smash hit.
to be a New York Times bestseller. No, I mean, it's an Ohio poet's memoir. So no one was more surprised about that than me. I think I was folding laundry literally when my agent called to tell me that I made the list.
Wow.
So that was certainly surprising.
And you had like two of your favorite songwriters like write songs based on your book too, right? Like
crazy. Yeah, crazy. And challenges. fear, and I think that's probably, whether it's a named challenge or an unnamed challenge, I think that's one of the challenges for all of us, like fear of failure, fear of exposure, fear of litigation, fear of just fear of falling short, fear of not making the thing that you think you want to build in your mind. And somehow, it's like that, the Instagram fail where you try to like make the cake based on the beautiful unicorn cake you see. And then it's like, nailed it. And it's like, looks like it's melting off to the side. And, no one wants to make something that doesn't sort of become the shining image in your mind that you think you're making. And so I think fear is always the challenge. And the goal is to overcome that.
The goal is to keep moving, as a wise person once said, in a book you can also pick up at your favorite local retailer. Thanks a ton, Maggie. This has been great. I loved your book. I truly, truly did. I hope people check it out. And thanks for taking time to be on this little show.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Relationscapes, where we're mapping the stories and ideas that shape who we are and how we connect with each other. And special thanks to Camille Messick, my wonderful transcript editor, and David Osler, who sponsored this first group of transcripts. And I'm looking for more transcript sponsors. If you're interested, you can contact me at blair@firesidepod.org. You can also reach out with questions about this episode or feedback about anything you've heard so far. And as usual, I'm asking you to rate and review the show if you haven't already done that. You can rate and review it in Apple Podcasts, and now you can rate and review in Spotify. Let me know what you think about it. Here's a new 5-star review from someone called Fan of the Sun. Check out the detail here. It says, I've really enjoyed the variety of books and subjects that have been covered so far. I've been able to incorporate some valuable aspect from each episode into my personal life. Yeah, I feel the same way. This is what I've loved most about doing this show, is even episodes where I think I don't have a lot of common ground with the book or with the guest. I find so many things that I share in common or things that challenge what I thought before. So thanks for that great review, Fan of the Sun. And I imagine with such a review like that, you've probably already recommended this show to a friend of yours, because you already know that's the number one way people hear about podcasts, through a friend. So thanks for doing that as well. Thanks to Mates of State for providing our theme song. Relationscapes is part of the Dialogue Podcast Network. I'm Blair Hodges, and I'll see you next time.